Hello, everyone. My name is Peter, aka the Mutton Chop Guy. I'm the host from the podcast called The Brothers Chronicles Sparks Reignited and Magic the Gathering. I'm also found on Facebook at The Brothers Chronicles MTG. My podcast is on the Podcast Garden. And what I'm doing today is making a video as a visual aid to help my listeners kind of see what I've been working on in terms of a deck. And I just did a deck tech episode for everyone, and then we'll actually have that episode linked in the description, and I'll also have this video linked in the description of my podcast episode, so that way they're both linked in some way so they can both be used side by side. So getting on, the idea of my deck is all based on, of course, Panharmonicon. Of course, I know there's many different variations of it. I know the most popular one so far right now is the blue-white version. The blue-white version is really, really good, and it is really, really popular, but I feel like there's some things that it's just lacking. And what I decided to go with is a kind of a 4-color, pseudo 5-color deck revolving around it. And the biggest reason I went with this is that it opens up the toolbox capability of Eldritch Evolution. And I really absolutely love this card, and I'm still trying to make it work in Standard, and I feel like this deck is pretty much where it needs to be for a nice home for Eldritch Evolution. So I'm just going to go ahead and start off with the mana base right off the bat. I have 4 Aether Hubs, 3 Evolving Wilds, 2 Canopy Vistas, 2 Prairie Streams, Quagmire, Lumbering Falls, Shambling Vents, and Inventor's Fair as my non-lands. Of course, this is really good mana fixing, help fetch out my basics to help with the mana fixing. And this is also really good utility right here because this is good for blocking when you have a big creature that it can block just to get rid of it. It's kind of a pseudo removal spell, which gives the deck more versatility. This is a hexproof creature, of course, so it's kind of difficult for your opponent to remove to kind of get an extra damage when you need to. Shambling Vent is also a good way to help stabilize while gaining life. And Inventor's Fair, of course, is just a good colorless source along with the Aether Hubs, of course, and being able to find your Panharmonicon rather easily with this felt like it gave more of a consistency to the deck. Of course, in the basics, I had 3 forests, 3 plains, a waste, an island, and a swamp. And the waste is there for 2 reasons: to get fetched out by Evolving Wilds, and also being able to consistently be able to activate Eldrazi Displacer and be able to cast Thought-Knot Seer in the situation that I have in my hand. These are pretty much the only 2 things that require colorless. So I think with 6 colorless sources, I think we'll be fine. One of them is hackable. So going that, so there's 24 lands in total, and then I move past the 1-drop straight into the 2-drops. You got Servant of the Conduit, again, good mana fixing and ramp. I feel like a turn 3 Panharmonicon is probably one of the most powerful plays this deck can have. Just because then you're turn 4, you're not sitting at a vulnerable point of the game where you can just get completely blown out and be able to start chaining effects really easily. Gluttonous Crane is just a way to consistently find not only Panharmonicon but other artifacts that we have, which I'll get into here in a second. And of course, Prophetic Prism is a mana fixer and a cantrip all in one, and it's an artifact at the same time, so it does trigger with Panharmonicon, so paying 2 mana to get 2 or 3 cards is actually just really, really good, and it helps with the consistency of the deck. And in our 3 drops, we have 2 Eerie Interludes, 3 Eldritch Evolutions, 1 Eldrazi Displacer, play set of Filigree Familiar, and 3 Reflector Mages. Here's the biggest thing. This makes this card super good. Okay, so being able to have an enter the battlefield trigger and a die trigger on one card is actually just really, really good. And I've been talking about this recently with my younger brother, and I really wish that they actually reprinted Solemn Simulacrum into the format, because then you have a 3-drop and then a 4-drop that would be able to have it come enter the battlefield and a die trigger. That would just make this way, way better. Unfortunately, we don't have that. So, just being able to draw a card and still gain life and being able to be used as a good sack fodder for this card is pretty much the strongest point that you have with it. And I just absolutely love this combination right here. These two cards just work so well together. They work really, really well in Modern and the Kiki Evolution deck, so why can it not work in Standard? Of course, Reflector Mage is against good aggro. It helps, control the board, bounces, and of course it gets even more insane when you have Panharmonicon, especially if you're able to bounce three of the same creature with this, with one Reflector Mage, then you just made them have 3 dead cards in their hand, and they can't do anything about it. And I think that's just absolutely awesome. Of course, Eldrazi Displacer is just a good tutor target, just to help get extra value from everything else. In terms of the creature toolbox that we have going, Eerie Interlude is there for 2 reasons. One is that it loops with Green Warden and Marasa, and the other is that it just helps magnify the power that Panharmonicon has with all these enter the battlefield triggers, and that's pretty much the main reason why it's in there. Of course, we get to the 4-drops. Of course, Panharmonicon, so full playset. Restoration Gearsmith I actually find very valuable in this deck due to the fact that when she comes into the battlefield, you get to return an artifact or a creature card from your graveyard to your hand, and with Panharmonicon, you can get a Filigree Familiar, and you can get any of the lower end creatures or any of your toolbox creatures that they manage to deal with, you can get them right back into your hand to reuse later. So it kind of gives you this great inevitable recursion value, especially if you get, this kind of setup in its own loop with 2 of them. So that's why I have 2 of them. Thought Seer I found is just a really good edge against control and Aetherworks Marble decks, just because it lets us rip a card out of their hand, and sometimes multiple if we get multiple Panharmonicons out. And then leaving battlefield trigger is not as bad when you already ripped like 3 cards out of their hand. So, you're putting them more far behind than giving them that advantage. And then, of course, 5-drops. Main finisher of this is Verdur's Gearhulk, and the main reason why Verdur's Gearhulk is so good in this deck is because of Panharmonicon being able to spread 8, 12, 16, 20 different +1/+1 counters, all amongst giant creatures. It's just absolutely insane. And, even having just 2, maybe, or at least even 1, being able to spread 8 power across your entire board is just really, really good. Cloud Blazer, of course, is just another really good utility tutor target. It's really strong with Panharmonicon. You're gaining 4 life and drawing 4 cards, or gaining 6, drawing 6. It's just really, really good. And Angel of Invention, I really feel like people are kind of down on this card. Yeah, it's not as powerful as, like, let's say Ishkanah. However, I feel like this is a good substitute for Ishkanah. Yeah, granted, I am running, artifact creatures, so it gives me 2 types. But my sorceries don't really go into the graveyard, and I only got 2 other instances and land, so that gives me like 5 types. I'm not really going to consistently get Delirium online, so I feel like Angel of Invention is a good substitute for that. Plus, she can go wide, and she can really go wide when you have Panharmonicons out, and if you manage to have her last a turn, then you can drop 4 counters right on top of her with Verdur's Gearhulk, turning her into a 6/5 instantly. And the Vigilance and Lifelink is something that's really, really good. Allows you to attack and still be able to defend, especially if she's much bigger. And the life gain that she provides is just really, really good. So I actually use her as a substitute for Ishkanah, as much as I would love to run Ishkanah. It's pretty tight in terms of what you can do with Panharmonicon. Artifacts and creatures are where you want to be. So, fortunately, gotta just deal with using Angel of Invention. Plus, getting 2 tokens and then 2 +1/+1 counters because of a Panharmonicon is not bad either. I get 2 2/2s and a 4/3, so that's 8 power on the board still. It's still really, really good. Of course, Noctis Gearhulk is such a valuable piece of this deck. It allows you to kill anything, gain a bunch of life, stabilize the board, especially if you manage to kill and they have 1 creature and they can't get any more creatures out on the board. This thing is unblockable. It deals damage. It's a massive clock. It's just really, really, really good, and I absolutely love this card. This is probably my favorite Gear Hulk out of all of them. That's mostly just because I'm a black player. Whereas Gear Hulk is great. I'm not a huge fan of Combustible Gear Hulk, and yeah, Tarantula Gear Hulk's really good, but if I had to put my money on any of them, it would first be this one. So, that's the main board. The point of the entire deck is that you need to get Panharmonicon out, and then you start abusing all of your enter the battlefield triggers, deck selection, mana ramping, doubling the amount of the triggers, tutoring up your entire toolbox, extra value, lighting and drawing cards for tutor value, controlling the board, and just completely breaking this engine apart. Recursion value, disruption value, finisher value, stabilization value, stable/finisher value, just stabilizers, infinite loop inevitability. It has everything I want in this deck. So, I know a couple of people who actually does the math on this, and if you notice that my average converted mana cost amongst everything is like 3.2 something, so there's actually really high converted mana cost. I only have 24 lands. Well, if you count the Servant Elements as half lands, and the draw ability of Prophetic Field, the draw ability of Prophetic Prism as half lands, then that's 1, 2, 3, 4. That's 28, and that's kind of the lowest number when you have an average converted mana cost of 3 is 28. So I feel like it's I have it set up just right. The mana base is pretty solid at this point. You don't really have so much issue in terms of getting mana screwed. The only one I would actually probably say that you do get screwed the most on is Thought-Knot Seer and Eldrazi Displacer in terms of the colorless, but at the same time, those are just very rare cases that happen. So don't always think, oh, it's just really, really bad. If you don't really, really like Thought-Knot Seer or Eldrazi Displacer, you can take them out and put something else in. You could probably take the Displacer out and put another Gluttonous Crane, or and then change Thought-Knot Seer into probably like Alter Ego or something. That's a good 4-drop. So, moving on to the sideboard, we have 3 Commencement of the Festivities. That is against aggro decks, especially against the Pummeler deck, because that is probably what I would consider our worst matchup, because their explosive power is just really, really good on turn 4 consistently. So, through massive amount of testing with this card, it's a really nice surprise on the opponent when they just go and just dump all their pump spells, especially if they use multiple blossoming defenses. Then it's just absolutely amazing, because they just wasted all their resources, blanketed all. They can't enter, they can't really stop. And I don't think there's a card out there in the standard format right now that says damage can't be prevented currently. So as long as that doesn't get printed, we should be fine. But if they print that, then there's the perfect sideboard answer against our sideboard cards, and it actually makes it a lot difficult. Card that I would also recommend is Repel the Abominable, since it just prevents all damage from non-human sources. Of course, if you have a heavy metagame of humans in your local area, then I would definitely recommend just Commencement. You can use Encircling Fissure, because it prevents all the damage that your opponent's creatures do, and not your own, so you can actually kill off their opponent's stuff. But I just feel like 2 mana at green, prevents damage, great fog effect. Really helps us stave off. The ideal thing you want is getting 2 of these in your hand and getting to starting out with 2 of those in your hand, and then getting to Panharmonicon by turn 4, and just playing probably a 2-drop, leaving the 2 mana open for Commencement of Festivities. That way, if they try to kill you, then you can fog it, and if they know that you have the fog in your hand, then they're going to try to play around it, in essence, just, incremental damage, which, you can probably just stave off with blocking. But once you actually get Panharmonicon and then have mana open up for Commencement, it's just really good against their deck. And then you can really start turning the corner just by chaining a few life gains, a few life gains, a couple of card draws, card selection, just start drawing cards and start looking for haymakers, which are pretty much anything right here. Pretty much these 5 right here are your haymakers that really help shut down that deck. But yeah, so this turned our worst matchup into a very fair matchup. Through my testing, when people figured out that I was playing with a fog, they were really, really having a difficult time being able to just go off and try to kill me in one turn. And once they actually start getting to the late game and they start running out of gas, then I start getting Panharmonicon slowly out. It really just starts turning the corner and shuts them down really fast. So, knowing that, our other, I would probably say is an okay, but sometimes really bad matchup is Control, and that's why we have 3 negates in the sideboard. It just really helps trying to get a Panharmonicon down and maintain getting the Panharmonicons down. It really helps protect, our area interludes. This, I would just absolutely take out. Do not play this against Control. Just the blowout on it is really, really bad. And so, and I would not play this against Aetherworks Marble. This and maybe these 5 can come out during Aetherworks Marble decks, and these 3 have to come out against that and Control. It's just really not good against, they're really not that great to deal with. But Negate will definitely come in to deal with the Controls in the Aetherworks Marble deck. Anguish I'm making is there for a lot of Planeswalker heavy fields. I feel like that's just been the most efficient way to deal with it because they just exile it. And it's actually just been really helpful. So this is where the sideboard actually starts turning interesting. Alter Ego is something I feel like people really should stop underestimating because, one, if you have to cast this, it can't be countered, and it's really good against the Control decks. And yeah, so I definitely would recommend you guys trying this. It's actually really, really good because it just copies any of your creatures into the battlefield triggers and just goes completely haywire, especially when you can actually get +1/+1 counters on it. Then it's just absolutely insane. Bring to Light is actually a very interesting toolbox card that I've been playing around with, and it's been very effective. I would take these out and bring these in against Aetherworks Marble because then I can actually just fetch up all my 5 drops and take out all my 6 drops. And bring in my 4 and 5 drops easily just to deal with them. Gonti has been hilarious with this deck. Definitely recommend you playing this card because it lets you get more information from your opponent's deck and what kind of deck they're playing. And if you see any of their key cards of what archetype they're playing, then you can actually take them. Being able to take multiple Aetherworks Marble with this card is just absolutely hilarious. And then being able to cast it, and getting a bunch of double triggers from Servant of the Conduit is just hilarious. Another thing is that this doesn't have to be on the field for you to cast that card as long as it remains exiled, as it says on the card. For as long as this card remains exiled, you may look at it and you may cast it. You may spend mana as though it was any type to cast it. And that means no, colorless, anything. Every type. But then you also have like Sigarda, which is good against Aetherworks Marble. Cataclysmic Gearhulk is good against things like the Colossus deck or vehicles or other type of aggro, not really good against the Pummeler deck. And Limvala is really good against some of the aggro like Black-Red aggro, Mardu vehicles, things like that. So is Demon of Darkskins, and it's so funny when you get multiple triggers off of this thing, especially there's been one time when I actually got Eldrazi Displacer to blink it and just kill all the vehicles and everything with it and just gain a crap load of energy. And of course, I just brought everything I had back and just completely wiped my opponent out. It was it was awesome. So that's pretty much the sideboard. You got aggro, your big aggro 3 here. Then you got some of your control toolbox elements. You got some extra utilities. One piece of removal suitably. Counter spells and your fogs. That's all you pretty much need. And I feel like this deck is really well rounded, and I hope you guys really enjoyed this visual aid. Once again, I am the host of the podcast, The Brothers Chronicles, Sparks Reignited, in Magic the Gathering that you can find on the Podcast Garden. If you guys like this video, give it a thumbs up. Let me know if you guys have any questions about certain matchups. Definitely let me know in the comments. I'll definitely get back to you and let you guys know how it goes. And I thank you guys so much for watching. You guys see you in the next one.